What is up, students? Hannah here. I'm one of the student pastors here at Bayside, and I get to launch us off on what is happening in our world on Wednesday nights via this platform. So here's what this is going to look like. Over the next many weeks, we're going to be diving through the book of Acts, and we will be studying it here together. The hope is that this will encourage you, this will build your faith, and give you some tools to live with Jesus out of in your life. So week one, what is happening? Maybe you've asked this question, and here's my question for you. Have you ever had a time in your life that felt more chaotic than the world today? This is crazy. Today, there's no toilet paper, there's no school, there's no human contact. What is even happening? In fact, that's the title of this message, is what is even happening? In the Bible, in the book of Acts, there is a crew of believers who were asking the very same question. In fact, they found themselves in a lot of chaos. This series is called More Than a Building, and we're going to be unpacking a lot of truths, but specifically how we can respond as the building, as the people in chaos. And these people in Acts, I got to give some context. So here's what this looks like. The book of Acts physically follows the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which tell the story of Jesus's life on earth. So literally and physically, Acts is what happens when Jesus leaves earth and goes to heaven, and 120 believers sit in a room and wait from God to know what to do next. And I want to look at a couple of verses where Jesus gives them these are his final words before he leaves to heaven, and he says this is what they need to hear. And I'm going to read this right now. It goes like this. They gathered around him, Jesus, and they asked him, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel? Verse 7, he said to them, it is not for you to know the time or dates the Father has set by his own authority, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. And then verse 9, after this, he was taken up before their very eyes, and a cloud hid him from their sight. A couple things about the church. Ready? One, when Jesus was on earth, he died on the cross, and that changed everything for Christians. Before this, their relationship with God was based on a building, the temple. Their relationship with God came from priestly intervention, and now because of Jesus' death on the cross, we get personal invitation to know Jesus. Literally everything about their lives had changed. They didn't know what to expect. They didn't know what was happening. They didn't know the fears that might be coming. They were sitting in a lot of unknown. So the big idea I want to talk through is this. Ready? In the chaos, we are commissioned. Jesus says these words, and I want to look at three things, because in the unknown, Jesus reminds us of three things based on these verses. Number one is we won't know the details, but God does. This is what verse 7 said. It is not for you to know the times or dates the Father has set by his own authority. Listen to this. God has chosen to not give you all the information. God has chosen that. So when you feel like life is crazy and you're asking why, I want you to just know, like in the middle of this coronavirus, God has chosen to not reveal some information to us. But here's the flip side. The flip side of this verse is that God intentionally knows all of the details. So he holds all the details and he intentionally hasn't given them. This gives us a lot of comfort when life feels unknown, that we have confidence in God. He is in control. He knows what's happening. Thing two that Jesus promises in this is that we won't be alone, but we will have the Holy Spirit. This is one of the most encouraging things about this passage. Let me read it again. Verse 8 says, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you. When Jesus physically left earth, we gained the Holy Spirit. When he physically left earth, we gained the Holy Spirit. Now, we don't just have Jesus sitting next to us like the disciples did, but we now have Jesus in us. This is what the Holy Spirit is. And here's the deal. When you're saved, we are promised that the Holy Spirit fills every believer. And here's what he does. He comes to speak to you, to encourage you, to confront sin in you, to celebrate you, and also to guide you. You are not alone, students. So whether you're in your house, whether you're in your room alone, whether you're missing hanging out physically with your friends, you are not alone. You have the Holy Spirit, and he empowers you. And the third thing that God promises us through this is this, ready? We will have power and purpose. Let me read this verse again. Verse 8 says, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses, check this, in Jerusalem and all Judea and Samaria to the ends of the earth. God in you means God's power in you. You have the power of God within you right where you're at. And I want you to hear this. God's given you power of influence. God's given you power of discipline, and God's given you power for boldness. Student, you've been commissioned right where you're at. For the disciples, for those 120 people, God gave them these words to commission them out. God has given you a promise, and he has given you a calling, and he has given you purpose. In these weeks where things are chaotic, in the unknown, we are commissioned. This word commission means that we are sent. We are physically sent, not just to your couch to binge watch Netflix or Disney Plus, but we are sent with a calling. Students, you are commissioned. And Craig's gonna come up here right now and give us a couple of responses, like, what in the world do we do with this commissioning? So, Craigo, 6 feet. 6 feet. 6 feet. Social distancing!
6 feet. So good, Hannah. Really, really incredible. We want to ask you a couple of questions that you can talk about at home. Maybe you're with some friends. Maybe you're with some family. Maybe you are tuning in virtually with your community. And here's the 3 questions. What has been the hardest thing for you in the midst of this chaos? What's been the hardest thing for you in the midst of this chaos? Your second question is, how does it make you feel knowing that God is in control? How does that make you feel that God has got it? And then the third question is this: knowing you have power and a mission, just like Hannah talked about, how can you be a witness to your family, to your virtual community that you are now in the middle of with friends and different people? How can you be a witness today? Imagine with me for a second what it would be like if you were to share this sermon, week 1 of More Than a Building, with somebody else. Imagine if every person who's watching this were to click share and send this to somebody, what that would do, what kind of impact that would make. So my encouragement, what do you do with all of this? You got your 3 small group questions right there. You might want to talk about those, dive through that, and then click share. Send this to somebody who needs to be encouraged today. Guess what? We're going to be back here, same time, same place, next week for week 2 of More Than a Building. We'll see you then.